Known as the king of crime fiction, Sir Ian Rankin has been writing novels for close to 40 years. His stories about the maverick Edinburgh detective John Rebus have sold more than 30 million copies worldwide, and various TV adaptations have been big hits. The novelist came into the studio to tell us about his new thriller Midnight in Blue, which finds Rebus in an alien environment. Ian, thanks so much for coming on the programme. You've thrown everything at Rebus over the years, and now he's in jail, surrounded by criminals that he's put there. You're not making it easy for him, are you?
No, and I wasn't even sure this book was going to get written, because the last book I thought ended well with a cliffhanger with Rebus basically about to be found not guilty or guilty of murder. I thought, what a great way to end the series, but fans disagreed and they wanted to know what happened in that courtroom. I thought, well, he's obviously found guilty, which means he obviously goes to prison. How interesting is that? An ex-CID detective in prison with people who dislike him, mistrust him, and some of whom want to do him ill because he put them in there.
He copes pretty well, though.
He does cope well. He's an institutional kind of guy. He copes well with institutions. I mean, when he left high school, he went straight into the army, which is an institution. He then joined the police, which is a hierarchy. And now he finds himself in prison, which is yet another hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. But he kind of rails against being institutions anyway, doesn't he?
Does. I mean, he needs something to be a maverick against.
Yeah, exactly. And this book is interesting because it's more of an ensemble cast of characters. So, you know, Siobhan Clarke, Malcolm Fox have got their own kind of subplots. Was that a necessity because you didn't want it all to be set in the jail?
Soon after starting writing the book, having thought it would all be set in prison, it did get a kind of claustrophobic, and I thought I do want to see the outside world. But luckily, having a murder in the jail, in a locked cell, the police, the CID would investigate, they would come in from outside, and then we, the reader, can follow them back outside again. Then I thought, well, what else are they up to on the outside? So I got a missing persons case, which eventually tangentially connects to the prison story. So there's Rebus on the inside, champing at the bit to be on the outside. Connected only very tenuously to the outside world and really missing the outside world almost for the first time.
Yeah. Not giving anything away here, but the end of the book, you leave a kind of open door for a 26th Rebus novel. So is that what you're working on?
I'm not working on anything. I'm working on trying to persuade my wife that I should keep writing. She wants me to retire. My dad retired at 65. She doesn't see any reason why I shouldn't retire at 65, which would be next year. But I like writing. When it's going well, it's like being a kid again. You know, when you're just making up stories with your imaginary friends, why would you want to do anything else? And
there is a huge appetite for Rebus. You've just learnt this afternoon that it's gone to #1 in the Sunday Times bestseller list. That must be, is it still as gratifying as it has been in the past? Yeah, because when the first book was published, nobody bought it. I mean, the first 5, 6, 7, 8 books disappeared almost without trace. You've sold quite a few since then, though. Aye, but it was book number 8 or 9 when I hit the charts, and it was Rebus book 10 or 11 before I hit #1. So it still feels quite new to me. And of course, it is a surprise. It's always gratifying to find that there is an audience out there for this curmudgeonly pensioner, as he now is. Yeah, and you created Rebus, nearly 4 decades ago, and you have kind of tried to shut him down, you've tried to retire him. Why do you keep coming back to him? Has he got a life of his own, almost? I think good characters have a life of their own. I mean, people come to the Oxford Bar in Edinburgh looking for him, not looking for me, and they're always disappointed when it's not him that's sitting in front of them, because I'm not as much of a maverick as he is. I'm not as dark and brooding and dangerous. But he's also a very good way of exploring Edinburgh, exploring Scotland, exploring the world, taking on big themes and big ideas. And also I want to get to the centre of what makes him tick, and I've not got there yet. Even all these books later, I still don't quite know what makes him the man he is. That's really interesting. We might come back to that because I have been rereading your first Rebus book. We'll come back to that in a second. But he's not just a big hit on the page. There's been various TV adaptations through the years, and the latest is the BBC's Rebus with Richard Rankin, and we'll have a wee look at a clip of that now.
You two met? Detective Sergeant John Rebus, meet Detective Constable Siobhan Clarke. Siobhan just came from the detective course.
I hear it's a whole week now. The detective course.
Yeah. Well, you can show her the ropes then, eh?
There's no ropes. They went out with the last budget cut.
So you were executive producer in this, and he's been reimagined as a young man set in present-day Edinburgh. A lot of people maybe won't recognise him though, because he's very sweary and he's really violent. I mean, do you still see him as your character?
Well, I think the early books were quite sweary and violent. We've just forgotten that. I mean, he was a much tougher character in those early books, and morally questionable in the early books as well. And I think Richard Rankin captures that really well. And the screenwriter Gregory Burke, who's a terrific dramatist and screenwriter, said, I want a young Rebus, I want a guy who's scary, who's physically able to get into fights and win them, unlike my 70-year-old Rebus that I write about. He said, but I want to set it in the present day so that we can discuss present day issues that are important to people, about jobs and no jobs, and the way the society's fabric seems to be fracturing and ripping apart. And I said to him, go for it. You know, you're a great writer. The themes you're interested in are themes that I'm interested in. Just go for it. So being executive producer doesn't mean, I mean, it means so much that they said to me, do you want to be a cameo? Do you want a cameo? And I went, yeah. So they said, come along to the Oxford Bar and we'll film you walking into the pub as Cafferty the gangster's walking out. And I sat in the back room for ages waiting, and when I emerged there was nobody there because they'd forgotten me. That's how important the executive producer is in the scheme of things.
Oh, that is absolutely brilliant. But what do Rebus superfans, Rebus purists think about it? Because I would imagine people are really passionate about this character because he's been around for such a long time, and they must feel ownership of him. What did they make of the portrayal? Were they offended?
Well, no, not offended. Nobody's been offended by it. It can take some people 15, 20 minutes to get into it, but once you get into it, the characters as they know them are all there. The scene is there. It's still Edinburgh. Yeah. It's still definably Rebus. He's still definably up against gangsters like Cafferty. His brother is back, who's a really interesting character who I threw away too cheaply, as my screenwriter told me. So he's back in a major role. But it's the world of Rebus. And, you know, we've had Rebus on the stage, we've had Rebus on radio, we've had various TV adaptations. He's been played by everybody from John Hannah to Brian Cox and everybody in between. They're all just different interpretations, and they all add a wee bit of something to the character, a wee bit to my understanding of the character.
And is that what keeps him interesting for you? You know, you've written a play about him as well. Is that what kind of keeps you going with him almost? Yeah,
I mean, he's you know, I'm a kind of boring person to hang around with. I sit and do the crossword and drink a pint, read a book, you know.
Talk about roadworks.
Yeah, talk about roadworks with you, obviously. We both have a passion for roadworks. But Rebus is a complex, charismatic, dark, brooding character. But he's on the side of the angels. He always is trying to do the right thing. And sometimes his way of going about it is not the correct way to go about it, but he's trying to get to the truth. He's trying to find an essential truth about the way the world operates. And we all want that. I mean, all readers come to fiction looking for the hidden meanings behind every day. And crime fiction says to them, we're going to have some fun while we do it.
And do you ever look back at your first Rebus books? You know, if you do, what do you think when you reread them? Because we had Christopher Brookmyre on recently, and he looks back at his early books and he says he's really proud of them. He said he wrote really fearlessly.
Yeah, they're overwritten. The first Rebus book in particular is wildly overwritten. It's written by a guy who's studying Scottish literature and wants to show you that he knows lots of big words. And Rebus is quoting poetry from poets that he would never have read, but I had read as a student. It took a while to get rid of the kind of literary qualities and actually get down to what really counts. So there was a kind of steep learning curve around about book 1, 2, 3, 4. It was around about book 4 or 5 I thought, okay, I really know what I'm doing now. Yeah. The problem these days is that no writer would get given that time by a publisher to learn the craft. If you're not making a few bob for your publisher by book 5 or 6, you're gone.
Yeah, because Noughts and Crosses, as I said, I've been rereading it. It does seem very different. He reveals a lot more of himself. He talks about his belief in God. There's also a lot more sex in it, Ian, I have to say.
I know, and I luckily got an editor who didn't much like sex and violence, so the Rebus books start to have less sex and violence in them from about book 3 onwards. Yeah, no, it's a dark book. It was meant to be the only book. It was meant to be an updating of Jekyll and Hyde to present-day Scotland, taking on kind of, you know, the big question of good and evil and what makes good people do bad things. And you're meant to think that this guy Rebus may be the killer. You know, he's having blackouts. As you say, he has sex with strange women. He's got a locked room in his flat that we never go into. You think, what's this guy hiding? I thought, I'm never going to write about him again. So I threw the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah.
And then my editor, a few books later on, said, whatever happened to that guy? I liked him.
Yeah.
And so back he came, and I just cannot get rid of him.
You said recently that you don't think crime books should be more than 300 pages, and a lot of books in that genre are a lot longer than that. Is that the editor's fault? Why do you think is 300 just the perfect?
It was slightly tongue-in-cheek. It was said slightly tongue-in-cheek, and there are plenty of caveats. There are plenty of long crime novels that I like a lot. But in general, I find when I'm writing a book, once I can say what I need to say. Most books can say what they need to say in 300 pages. Crime novels start to get very long because the computer came along, which meant you could keep writing, and it was very easy to keep writing. Whereas handwriting or a typewriter, it was hard work to correct stuff as you went. And B, publishers started saying to crime writers, if you want to be taken seriously as a novelist, not just as a crime writer, but as a novelist, you've got to give us 300 pages. It's like people think that is a serious book. 200 pages is a puzzle, 300 pages plus is a serious book. So books got longer.
Yeah.
But if you look at some of the best crime stories and novels in the world, whether it's Conan Doyle, Agatha Christie, whoever, under 200 pages. And my favourite writers like Muriel Spark, under 200 pages. Robert Louis Stevenson, what's Jekyll and Hyde? 150, if that?
Yeah.
Great books.
It sounds to me like you have got another Rebus book in you. I'm going to put my money on it, Ian. It sounds like you're still kind of fascinated by him. To me, that's really interesting after all these years.
I don't know. I don't know. There's not a lot more I can do with him in his 70s. He can't chase suspects. He can't get in fights. He's no longer a cop. He's got COPD, he's got some health issues. What can I do with him that's realistic? It's the realism aspect that's always bothered me. How do I keep it realistic for the reader? I could, though, go back in time.
Okay, well, me and millions others, I'm sure, will be hoping that you do. Ian, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.